Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, animal star power. Is celebrity status a good thing? Presented by Nat Hab Expedition Leader Aditya Panda. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Over to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. For those of you who do not know me, I am Aditya Panda. I lead Nat Hab's India expeditions, and I've been leading them since 2016. Today, I'm presenting from a remote location, so I do not have the best internet, and I do not have electricity. It's the middle of the night, and it's raining. So in case there are any internet issues or funny noises in the background, please bear with me. Now that is a very loaded word, anthropomorphism. People have strong opinions about it, yet almost all of us do it in some way or the other, especially when it comes to animals. All of us like to think of our pets, for example, as family, and we tend to ascribe human characters to them. And, in some of the world's most visited national parks and wildlife sanctuaries and other wildlife destinations, often, especially with what we call charismatic megafauna, the large animals that humans find irresistible, like elephants and big cats. There are some individuals in many of these destinations that become very easily visible, that are seen on a regular basis, and everyone from guides to tourists to park managers and local people begin to recognize certain individuals, give them names, and ascribe anthropomorphic characters to them. Let's meet some such animals from India's national parks today. We will learn their amazing stories, and we will also discuss what anthropomorphism does to conservation. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it both? How does it help and how does it hurt? We will discuss that. Let's start with a very famous tiger called charger. Now, among wild tigers, among wild animals, charger was probably one of the first tigers who became a safari superstar. There were many tigers before him who were well known, but safari tourism wasn't big before the 90s, and tigers prior to the 90s, especially until the 60s and 70s, were more known for being stars of hunting stories or shikar books, and those tigers were known for completely different reasons. For example, if any of you have read Jim Corbett's famous books on the man-eating tigers from northern India, he made many tigers famous, but for all the wrong reasons. So here we're going to talk about tigers that are popular mostly for the right reasons. Charger lived in Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, where we visit on the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, and he lived there he's believed to have been born in 1984, and he died in 2000. So he was really famous in the 1990s. Before Charger, and there was also another tigress called Sita. Very few people knew of Bandhavgarh. It was not seen as among the top wildlife places in India. Places like Corbett Tiger Reserve and Ranthambore and Kanha were far more, they were far better known. But this tiger, because of his personality and because of his bold nature and easy visibility, just brought the world's attention to Bandhavgarh. This particular picture of his was one of the first pictures of wild tigers published in National Geographic magazine. And there have been several films and documentaries that star this particular tiger. Now, why was he called Charger? Because that's what he loved to do. He used to charge jeeps and domestic elephants on which tourists and filmmakers and photographers and park managers used to visit him or follow him. And this tiger was quite a, he was literally the patriarch of the park. And Bandhavgarh in the 90s was, it was at that point of time a fairly recent tiger reserve. And Charger and Sita were sort of the founding pair that contributed tremendously to the lineage of tigers that followed them in Bandhavgarh. When Charger died in 2000, he was 16 years old, which is unusually old for a wild male tiger. And the park management in his last days were actually even feeding him because he was too weak to hunt by himself. And the spot where he was cremated, like people are cremated in India because, in Hinduism, we cremate our dead. And Charger was similarly cremated when he died. And the spot where he was cremated is called Charger Point, and there's a sign sort of marking that. And we do get to see that sometimes on our game drives in Bandhavgarh. Now that's one of his pictures from, when he was much older, probably in 98 or 99. Now, Charger and Sita brought the world's attention to Bandhavgarh, but it was really B2 who was Charger's son and a natural born star. It was B2 who actually was among the first tigers that he had so much charisma that people from all over the world would come to Bandhavgarh to want to see him, not just any tiger, but to want to see and photograph B2. Now that in many ways started that sort of star culture among wildlife tourists. This particular tiger was one of those celebrity tigers who really took things to a different level. Charger was well known. He had a name, people knew of him, but B2 turned out to be like a movie star. People would come to Bandhavgarh to only see him, and undoubtedly many people who might have visited would have seen other tigers, but probably not B2 during their drives. And many people started actually returning home disappointed that they hadn't seen this particular tiger. So B2 really marked that transition into celebrity sort of fanatism among wildlife tourists. Today, the tigers that we see in Bandhavgarh, most of the tigers are descendants, they're progeny of this lineage of Charger and B2. This is B2's grandson. This tiger is called Bhim, which is the name of a Hindu god who was really big and strong, and no prizes for guessing why this particular tiger is called Bhim. Just look at him. This was on one of the game drives on the Grand India Wildlife Adventure that we got to see him on. It was a late winter afternoon and we heard a tiger roaring, and we just parked there and waited and the roars kept coming closer and closer, and from the jungle into the grassland emerges this massive big tiger with a huge scar on his nose. From this angle on this picture, it appears as if he's got two noses. That's actually his nose split into two, because very like his grandfather and great grandfather, this tiger does not shy away from fighting other males to protect his territory. And just look at the amount of mane he's got on his neck. It almost looks like he's got his hackles raised. He doesn't. He's just in his beautiful thick winter coat, and I've never seen hair that long on a tiger's neck. This tiger is called Bamera's son. In other words, son of the Bamera male tiger. The Bamera male was B2's son. So they're a great grandson of Charger, who still dominates the prime areas of Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, continuing that lineage. Let's move from Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve now to Ranthambore Tiger Reserve, where we go on the India Tiger Quest and the Tiger Photo Pro trips. Ranthambore is a really well-known tiger reserve, and any number of movies and documentaries have been made on it, books have been written on it, and it's the mecca of tiger photography. And one particular tigress played a massive role in making this place so well known. She was undoubtedly the most well-known tiger in the world, and still perhaps is the most well-known tiger in the world. And she's called Machli, or the Lady of the Lakes. Now, the reason why she's called that is because she's got a fish-shaped stripe on the left-hand side of her head. Well, it takes some imagination to notice it. If you look right above, right next to her left eye, there's a stripe that appears like a fish with, you can see the tail fin if you use a little bit of imagination. But the Hindi word for fish is Machli, and that's why she was referred to as Machli. Now, she's actually Machli the second. Her mother was also called Machli, but she was called Machli because she spent so much time in and around the water. The central parts of Ranthambore Tiger Reserve is called the lakes area. For those of you who might have been to Ranthambore and others who might have heard me speak of Ranthambore on several webinars in the past, you will know that Ranthambore is a very, very arid sort of tiger habitat. In fact, it's the driest tiger habitat in the world, and water is scarce there. But the central part of the park has these beautiful old man-made lakes around which a lot of wildlife congregates, and around which historically there has always been a resident tigress who has always been the most successful tigress in the park, because she's got such a fabulous piece of real estate with water and prey. So Machli was called Lady of the Lakes for that reason, and she ruled that area for about 20 years. That's actually 21, and that's I think till date the longest known life that a wild tiger has been known to live. Machli became so famous and got in so many people from around the world down to Ranthambore to see her, that it is believed that within her lifespan, from the period she's believed to have been born around 1997. So say from around 1999 is when she must have become an adult tigress and was seen widely and began to become a star. Now, it is believed that in her lifespan, uh, just through tourism revenue, she has contributed or rather helped earn 100 million US dollars for the park management of Ranthambore National Park and Tiger Reserve. 100 million US dollars. Can you imagine one wild animal bringing in so much revenue that not only goes back into conservation, it also goes into the management of the park and the livelihoods of so many people and communities that live around the park and are dependent on it and on tourism for making a living. It's incredible that a single wild animal can contribute that much to the local economy. And for that reason, she was actually awarded a lifetime service award by an organization called Travel Operators for Tigers. So I don't think very many wild animals in the world have been conferred these lifetime achievement awards. Of course, Machli couldn't attend the ceremony because she had no idea about it. But the reason why tigers like Machli and Charger and B2 and some other tigers that we will talk about later, the reason why they become so famous is because these tend to be individual animals that are comfortable with being seen. Unlike most tigers, these particular individuals do not appear to show any fear or apprehension or nervousness around jeeps, and therefore they become extremely photogenic animals that are easy to see and easy to film and easy to photograph. In fact, Machli was so comfortable around jeeps that she would actually use the cover of jeeps to stalk and kill her prey. And she raised 11 cubs. She gave birth to 11 cubs. So that's her contribution to tiger conservation. And these cubs were, they grew up around a mother who was so comfortable around jeeps that the cubs automatically grew up to be very comfortable around jeeps. And, when Machli passed away in 2018, she was almost literally given state honors and, a very tearful farewell. In fact, towards the end of her life, for the last 2 years of her life, she also was being fed artificially by the park management. And I was on the topic of Machli's cubs, and here is Arrowhead, one of her. I think she's a great granddaughter, and those cubs, since they grew up so comfortably and without any fear of jeeps, it led to a lineage of tigers that have grown up being comfortable and easy to sight, and that is great for tourism and for photography and for studying the natural history of tigers. So a daughter of Machli and a granddaughter of Machli, a great granddaughter, and as soon we will see a great granddaughter, have now all inherited the lakes area of Ranthambore, and each of them is referred to as the Lady of the Lakes when she's ruling that particular area. And this was Arrowhead. She was the Lady of the Lakes for a while, and that's her daughter Riddhi, who is now the new Lady of the Lakes after having driven Arrowhead away. From Ranthambore, let's come to Kanha Tiger Reserve in central India. Kanha is a national park and tiger reserve that we also visit on the Grand India Wildlife Adventure. It's one of the 3 national parks that we visit. And at Kanha, there was this amazing tiger called Munna. And Munna was, apart from being extremely comfortable and extremely confident around people and jeeps. Well, not people exactly, but jeeps, because tigers don't see the difference between, humans on foot and people in jeeps. They, like most animals, they treat jeeps as some other sort of probably bovine animal that never leaves the road and never chases anybody. So, tigers are apprehensive of people on foot because they can make out that it's the biped form that is, historically been a threat to them. And the jeep is something that they do not associate with people. But anyway, Munna was really, really confident. He was absolutely not bothered by the presence of jeeps and tourists around. And what really made him a star was not only his attitude, but look closely at his forehead. See the stripes on his forehead, and you will see that they sort of form the characters C-A-T. So the stripes on his forehead actually read the word cat. And there couldn't have been a cooler cat than Munna. And if you again use a little bit of imagination, just below the stripes that read cat are another bunch of stripes that read B and M. So the guides and drivers in Kanha often refer to him as best male. So now Munna again is a tiger that I have great memories from. And I've seen him several times, and he has always been so comfortable and such a treat to watch, because he makes absolutely no effort to get away from jeeps. He's absolutely relaxed and a great tiger to watch and photograph. I remember once on a morning game drive. At that time, this was before I was leading with Nat Hab. This was when I used to work as a camp naturalist at Kanha National Park. So I would drive almost every day or every other day into the park with my guests. And I remember one morning towards the end of the morning drive, we had found Munna lying in thick cover, as tigers do later in the morning. They tend to rest through the middle of the day in shade and close to water. We found Munna fast asleep. You could barely see him. I had stood up on the seat of my jeep, and with my neck craned and with my binoculars, I could barely make out that the tiger was there, lying in thick cover. And of course, we knew it was Munna. We'd seen his head and we know his area. And, we'd become so familiar with him that we could tell Munna even from his silhouette. And as we were parked, waiting for the tiger to get up and move, which I knew he wouldn't, because, it was close to 11 in the morning. And there was no chance of him getting up until late in the afternoon, when the day cooled down. And as I was waiting there, because there was nothing else that was better to do, and anyway, sometime we would have had to turn back and head out of the park to the lodge, because you have to get out by 11 o'clock. And at that point, another jeep came and parked next to me. And there was this gentleman. He was an Indian, but he used to live in Dubai. And he had a massive camera and the entire jeep to himself, and he was there, and he got really, really upset that the tiger was so far away and in thick cover. And he started to chat up with us, and he told me that he had come down to Kanha just for the weekend, only to watch Munna, only to get some photographs of Munna, because Munna was such a social media star. And this gentleman just wanted a picture of this tiger with those stripes that read CAT. And he had flown down for one weekend from Dubai to this tiger reserve in central India. And within this one weekend, he not only hoped, he expected to get some great pictures of this tiger and be back in Dubai on Monday morning. And, it was, I told him that, it was absolutely lucky, just pure luck, that in such a short time, he could even get to see this tiger, because, it's a large park. There are several other tigers, and you can't just put your money on seeing one particular tiger among 100+ tigers in an area that is 2,000 square kilometers in one weekend. And it did nothing to make him feel any better. So that's the kind of star power that Munna commanded, and that's the kind of effect that these tigers have on social media and on people from across the world. Anyhow, Munna, by the time he turned around 18, which is really unusually long for a wild tiger, especially a male tiger, because most male tigers die by the time they're about 12 years old or so. Now, Munna turned 18 and he could no longer hunt. So he moved out of the park into the fringes and started killing cattle, because they were easier to hunt than the deer. And unfortunately, he killed a young woman one day, and that's when he was caught. And it was decided that it's better if a tiger that old and that incapable of hunting be sent to a zoo. But in his 18 long years, Munna ruled over almost every part of Kanha and sired many, many cubs. And his progeny still continues to, be the primary sort of lineage that one sees in the tourism areas of Kanha. This is his son, Link 7, who also inherited his father's swagger and confidence, and who was equally becoming a star. And I just loved this particular tiger. He was so chilled out and so nice to be around that it was just an absolute treat to see this tiger. And it was such a good looking tiger, Link 7. Unfortunately, a few years ago, he just vanished while still in his prime. And till date, we have no idea where he is, whether he is alive or dead. But the Munna and Link 7, Link 7 was also called Chota Munna, by the way, which means junior Munna. Their lineage still continues in Kanha, and there are a lot of tigers that have descended from them and share their confident attitude and amazing good looks. Not far from Kanha is a reserve called the Pench Tiger Reserve. which is where, as a matter of fact, Rudyard Kipling based his Jungle Book. You might have read that Mowgli's village was somewhere in the Seoni Hills, and that is where Pench National Park is. Now, in Pench was this tigress that, became again extremely famous, and this is a picture of her that I had taken in 2010. She was called Collar Wali, or that literally translates into the tigress with the collar. And she had been radio collared, as part of a study on tigers. And she was born to a tigress called Badi Mada, or big mother, big female, who happened to be the star of a BBC series of two films called yes, it was two films, not three, called Spy in the Jungle. You must look it up. I think it's on YouTube. So in Spy in the Jungle, there are these remote cameras that are placed in the jungle, and these cameras, of course, at that point of time, it was pioneering technology, where these remote operated cameras were sort of sent near tigers, and they filmed the life history of a tigress and her 4 newborn cubs until the cubs became adults. And one of those cubs, in fact, was this particular tigress called Collar Wali. I had first seen her in 2008 when she was a young tigress, about 2.5, 3 years old maybe. And, that's when she had her first litter of cubs. Collar Wali became this amazing tigress that produced a record number of cubs in her lifetime. She actually gave birth to 29 cubs, which is extremely unusual, and it's absolutely astounding that a single tigress could produce so many cubs in her lifetime. Her first litter was 4 cubs, and she successfully raised them to adulthood. Now, usually a tiger will have 2 to 3 cubs, sometimes 4, but usually only 1 or 2 actually make it successfully to adulthood. But in the case of Collar Wali, almost all of her cubs made it to adulthood successfully. Her first litter was of 4 cubs, and her second litter was actually 5 cubs. Now, there is actually an instance on record that this particular tigress killed a dozen spotted deer in one go, in one time, to actually train those 5 cubs to be able to hunt and to be able to provide for them. Because raising 5 cubs to adulthood is no mean deal. I mean, it's extremely difficult to raise so many cubs, and to be able to successfully hunt to satiate their appetites when they're close to 2 years old or so, because that's literally one tigress hunting for 6 grown tigers. And that's very difficult, because a tiger only successfully makes a kill every 10 or 20 attempts. And thanks to the rich prey base of Pench Tiger Reserve, this tigress managed to raise these cubs, these large litters of cubs, successfully to adulthood. That was the last time I had seen Collar Wali. This was in March of 2021. She passed away at the age of 16 in January this year. Now, not all well-known tigers are safari superstars. Some of them are tigers that people haven't even seen, but they name them, they connect with them emotionally, and they literally go out onto the streets to try and protect them. And one such tigress was a tigress in central India who did not live in a national park or a tiger reserve or a safari destination. She lived in an area well outside protected areas, in common lands and reserve forests, where her territory was in the midst of human habitation and overlapped with human habitation. And this was a tigress that was raising cubs, and she lived in an area that did not have enough prey. It had a lot of livestock that used to graze there, and a lot of people who used to move on foot in that area all the time. And this tigress initially started killing cattle to help feed her cubs. And usually what happens when a tiger or a leopard kills livestock is that the herder starts to chase the big cat away from his animal. And in most cases, the tiger or the leopard would run away because they have an inherent fear of humans and do not see humans as natural prey. But sometimes, like in the case of this particular tigress, they are desperate enough to hold their ground, and then sometimes they start killing people. And once they start killing people, they realize that humans are actually not very strong and not very dangerous, and that they can be killed and that they can be eaten. And this tigress ended up killing 13 people because she was raising cubs. She needed to feed them too. And she killed 13 people in a row and was declared a man-eater. And she was shot after she was declared a man-eater. Now in India, only the chief wildlife warden of a particular state has the authority to, in the rarest of rare circumstances, issue orders to have a scheduled species or a protected species killed. So, it takes a lot for a state's chief wildlife warden to issue orders for having a tiger killed. And that's what happened in the case of this tigress, who was named Avni. She was named Avni by people who had never seen her, by people who lived far away from the site of these killings in the cities of India. And there was a huge uproar when orders were issued to kill her. She was all over the press, she was all over social media, and when she was eventually shot, because the authorities could not successfully capture her and had to shoot her as the next resort, it absolutely drove people out onto the streets in protest against the killing of that tiger. And there were many protests, many candlelight marches, and a huge public outpouring against the killing of this tigress. In fact, the whole issue, the whole story became so famous or infamous, as however one wants to see it, that a movie was actually made on it. A movie that you could actually look up online and watch with subtitles. I strongly recommend this movie. It's called Sherni, which is the Hindi word for tigress. It is a really good movie to, in a simplistic way, learn of all the complexities that go into conserving tigers, and into all the challenges that the Forest and Wildlife Department faces in trying to achieve this objective. It does a great job of showing how delicate and how difficult matters can be in conserving potentially dangerous large mammals in human-dominated landscapes. Back in Ranthambore, a similar story had happened in 2014 when a male tiger that had been, this was in the national park, a male tiger called Ustad, which means master. He attacked 4 people, of which 3 died, and 2 of those people were actually park guards, so park rangers. And orders were issued to capture him and have him put in a zoo, and that's where he lives now. But again, even in the case of Ustad, there was tremendous outpour of protests, trying to force the government and the authorities into not capturing him and actually leaving him alone, because so many people had come to Ranthambore and seen him and taken pictures of him and connected with him. So again, Ustad was all over the press, and it created a huge uproar when he was captured and sent to the zoo. Far less disappointing stories. I'll introduce you to 2 other animals that have become huge stars in the safari circuits. One of them is a black panther that is unusually bold and camera friendly, called Blackie or Saya. Saya is a Hindi word that means shadow, and he lives in an area called Kabini in southern India. And again, this leopard is so famous that he drew people from all over the world, because really there's nowhere else in the world where you have any sort of guarantee at getting to photograph a black panther in the wild. And there's even a documentary style, or rather a movie style documentary on him that you could look up. And again, in the same national park is an elephant, or rather was an elephant, called Mr. Kabini, who probably had the longest tusks of any Asian elephant. And unfortunately, he died at the ripe old age of 70 recently, and was again given almost a state burial. So, this sort of connect between people and wild animals, individual wild animals, is, as you would all agree, very one-sided. I mean, these are not our pets. These animals don't even care for us. They have no feelings for us. They don't even recognize us, even though we keep going back to the national parks where they live to try and see them again and again and follow them through their lives. So what does this sort of anthropomorphism cause? There are many ways in which they are, that anthropomorphism is a problem. And, we saw in the case of those 2 man-eating tigers, the outpouring of protest and grief and, public pressure, the sheer public pressure on the authorities of the day to not act against those tigers, where it really interfered in wildlife management. It potentially delayed action that potentially caused more human deaths. And acts like feeding a well-known wild animal just because it is well-known, feeding it when it is at an age that it should be naturally dead, and making room for younger, more productive animals to take its place. I think I'm very uncomfortable with things like that, because that is interference of the wrong kind. And why should an animal, a wild animal, be cremated in the style or buried in the style that humans are, when it has died of natural causes? I mean, it's one matter if an animal has been found poached, and after an autopsy it is disposed of in a way that its parts are destroyed and cannot be trafficked. But if an animal in a protected area dies a natural death, it should be allowed to be claimed by the scavengers and to go back into the earth. So there are all these uncomfortable, disturbing questions that arise out of anthropomorphism. Uh, just because people connect with individual wild animals in a certain way, I don't think that should be a reason for interfering in wildlife management. Also, would you think that this is the right way to get to learn natural history? Is this the right way to have the natural world interpreted to us? I wouldn't think so. But having said all this, I don't think anyone can deny that this sort of emotional connect, personal connect that people feel with uh, certain individual animals of these keystone species definitely causes these particular animals to be ambassadors of their species and the conservation of their species. And 100% I would agree that these particular star animals have played a massive role in creating mass public support for the conservation movement, and in really creating middle class support for wildlife conservation that serves as a huge check and balance for governments and authorities that are tasked with the job of preserving our wild animals and wild spaces. And with that, I would like to end today's webinar. I'm sorry I keep saying tonight, because it is night where I am. And I'd love to hear what questions you have waiting for me.
All right, thank you. Now, before we start the question and answer session, I'd like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. So, can you tell us a few other movie titles that feature some of these famous tigers in them?
Oh, there are lots. I can't immediately recall names, but if you look up, so I think there's one called Tiger Fortress, and if you look up on the internet, you'll find a lot of lovely films and documentaries, especially by the BBC and Geographic, on these parks and the tigers that live in them. And actually, these particular tigers, if you just look up the names that I took of these tigers are so famous that you just put them on Google and you'll get a lot of films and a lot of books and a lot of other references on the first page itself.
So, can you tell us why it was not possible to shoot, was it Athena with the tranquilizer dart? Was she not considered a candidate for a reserve or a zoo?
Well, that was the preferred option. That was the first option. And there is a little bit of controversy about, why that wasn't done. So this is a tigress with 2 cubs. So having to shoot her meant that the cubs would be lost. The cubs were not old enough to fend for themselves, and it was advised that all efforts be made to tranquilize her and capture her. And failing that, that she'd need to be shot. The controversial part of this is that the private hunter who was tasked with shooting her is, it's alleged that he sort of rigged the whole thing, and then he shot her first, and then had a crank dart punched into her. But that's the controversial part. But officially, she was shot because tranquilization failed.
So, can you tell us what happened to her cubs?
The cubs were, I think, captured much later. They were baited and fed for a while, but I believe they were captured later. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll have to check. But for at least a year after she was shot, the cubs were sort of aided by feeding them with baited animals, and they did manage to survive for at least a year after she died.
Great. Well, thank you for addressing that. But that's the last question that we have for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you may have.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you to the audience. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and I look forward to seeing you on my next one.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, if you're interested on how you can travel with Nat Hab, give us a call at the number on your screen or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us next week for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week.